the Lake District. This is Wordsworth country, and it's my country. I'm Peter Sidwell, and I'm a chef. The lakes might have fed the great man's passion for poetry, but it feeds my passion for cookery. Coming up, there's my chocolate and orange shortbread and wild boar burgers with gingerbread. Plus I pay a visit to Grasmere, the place Wordsworth called home, and home to a world famous sweet treat.
Welcome to the Lakes on a Plate.
I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze.
As if you didn't know, that was William Wordsworth. Born in 1770, by the time of his death in 1850, he had produced some of English poetry's greatest works. And talking of work, it's time I hit the kitchen. Gonna make some cracking little chocolate and orange shortbreads. Going on a bit of a road trip today down to Grasmere. Gonna go to Dove Cottage where Wordsworth used to live. So to start this recipe, we need 250 grams of butter, so one block, nice and easy. And then we want 125 grams of icing sugar. This recipe I'm using here, I picked it up from France. We used to go skiing before Poppy was born, every year to a little village called Saint-Gervais. Cracking little place, really, really nice. And there was this fantastic bakery that used to make these every day. When we picked up the croissants for breakfast, we'd go and get some of these shortbreads and stuff them in our ski jackets. So we've got a block of butter in there, 125 grams of icing sugar, and then we need 2 egg yolks. So just separate your eggs. Keep the whites in that bowl, because we'll use those in a minute. So in there. Just pop the mixer on a slow speed. While that's mixing, just want a little touch of vanilla extract. So just pop that in. And then while that's mixing, we'll zest an orange. Chocolate and orange, best combination ever. We need 350 grams of plain flour. Now it's really important you put plain flour in, otherwise the biscuits are going to kind of puff up and souffle up and you don't want that. That should be enough. And then I want some dark chocolate. And I always use dark chocolate on this because of the sweetness of it. You need that sort of slightly bitter flavour. And I don't weigh these, I just usually put a good couple of generous handfuls in. I always find if you use milk chocolate, it's a little bit too sweet. And then just on a low setting, turn the mixer back on until it comes together. You don't want to overwork it. So that should be enough. And then just pull the mixer blade out. Take the biscuit mix and then just turn it straight out onto a worktop. And the key is not to overwork this recipe. Otherwise you're going to get quite sort of tough shortbreads. You want it nice and delicate. So now you've got it like this. Touch of flour on your hands will help because the butter's a little bit soft. And then just kind of bring it all together. I always like to shape these into like a triangular shape. Don't ask me why, it's just the shape that I've always made. But you can do rounds, you can do squares, whatever you like. What I tend to do is then just shape it, drop it, roll it over, and do the same again. And it just kind of helps with the shape. I quite like the triangular shape on this. So once that's shaped up, we just need some caster sugar. And then with the egg whites that we kept to one side and a pastry brush, I'm just going to brush the egg whites onto the edges of the shortbread. So if you do 2 sides first, and then we're just going to sprinkle the sugar on. And what this does is it creates like a really nice sort of coating on the outside. So you get that really nice sort of sweet crunch when they're cooked. And then once you've got all the sugar to stick on one side, just carefully turn it over and then just brush that last side there with some egg white and then sprinkle that side there. And then just give it a bit of a roll around, get up any sugar that's escaped, and then just pat it really, really gently. I'm going to pop that in the fridge to firm up for about an hour. I cut the shortbreads into 1 centimetre thick slices and then bake them for 12 minutes at 160 degrees. And as you can see, they're perfect golden and smell fantastic. They're going to be great to take to Grasmere. Fancy trying this for yourself? Head to channel4.com/4food.
William Wordsworth called Dove Cottage home for 9 years. He moved in with his sister Dorothy in 1799. This is the place where he penned his greatest works. It's not known exactly when the cottage was built, but historians think it was probably sometime in the 17th century. Its original use is also unknown, but one thing we know for sure is that during the second half of the 18th century, it became an inn called the Dove and Olive. Many of the distinctive features date from this time: its whitewashed walls, flagstone floors and dark wood panelling. However, in the early 1790s, the Dove and Olive closed. It seems likely that the building remained empty for the next few years, until William and his sister arrived as tenants on the 20th of December 1799. As Wordsworth himself wrote, "Where the dove and olive bough once hung, a poet harbours now, a simple water-drinking bard." And Peter's here to find out more from house guide Mark Ward.
So we're in the kitchen, one of my favourite rooms. This must be where all the food was cooked for Wordsworth.
Well, here and the kitchen parlour, although in the Wordsworth time the fires would have been actually quite a lot bigger, this was probably more likely to be an oven, a bread oven, and the room through there they would have had an open range with probably a pot cooking on there.
In the building's time as a pub, the downstairs bedroom would have been used as a drinking room, but for the Wordsworths it was always used as a bedroom. Initially this is where Dorothy slept, and it would have been here that she wrote much of her Grasmere journals. In 1802, William married childhood friend Mary Hutchinson. They went on to have 5 children. Dorothy continued to live with the couple and grew close to the new Mrs. Wordsworth. From the start, the family decided to use the upstairs bedroom as their sitting room. Without the dark panelling of the rooms downstairs, it was naturally brighter, making it a much better place for reading and writing. It's here that Wordsworth pens some of his great works, but you won't find a desk. He hated them, saying they were devices of torture, so he wrote sitting in a cutlass chair, so named because you could sit in it wearing a cutlass. The family were always entertaining guests. Sir Walter Scott paid a visit in 1805. Scott was a considerate, if slightly unusual guest.
Walter Scott said in a letter that in the Wordsworth's house he got 3 hot meals a day, but he noted that 2 of those were porridge. And Scott was used to finer fare than that, so the story goes that he used to get up earlier than everybody else, he used to slip out through the upstairs window and go up to the Swan up the road for a big fry-up, and then come back down and climb back in through the window and then go downstairs and have some porridge when the rest of the family...
It's a man after my own heart. I think I'd do the same.
In Wordsworth's time there was a window tax imposed countrywide, so people were taxed according to the amount of windows they had in their house. People didn't pay it, they had to break the windows up. And it was Wordsworth's friend Charles Lamb who coined the term daylight robbery to describe it.
So what did they do in the evenings then? Because obviously there was no daylight then.
Aside from the fires, they made candles. Candles were also taxed. This is a candle mould, yeah.
Okay.
And they would stuff these with mutton fat and then let it solidify, and then they'd make these tallow candles and see how black it is.
Yeah.
And these burnt with thick black smoke. And when you see we've taken away the whitewash from the walls, that's the colour that the walls in the cottage would have been.
So all the walls would have been that really dark colour?
They had to whitewash every 6 months or so, otherwise they'd lived in permanent darkness. But just lighting the fires and the candles was a problem. And for that you needed one of these. This is a tinder box. The population of Grasmere in Wordsworth's time was 270 people. There was a church, there was a scattering of houses. And the Wordsworths were the only people in this village with one of these. And they brought this back from the trip to Germany the year before. Would you like me to demonstrate it for you?
I'd love you to, yeah, definitely.
So you take your flint and you struck it onto the iron,
Yeah.
lit a fire in the box, dipped the stick in sulphur and flared that up and used that to light the fires, and then you'd use your damper to put the fire out in the box afterwards. It was such an ordeal lighting a fire that people literally didn't let these fires go out, and in some of these cottages reported that they burnt continuously for up to 50 years. Dorothy Wordsworth talks about coming home one day and they'd accidentally let the fire go out, so she said they all just went to bed because there literally wasn't anything else they could do.
Little room here just off the kitchen. Can you tell me about what's going on in there?
It's called the buttery. It's not because they used to make butter in there, it's after the butts of ale, when going back to this, this place used to be a pub.
There's a stream running under the floor, so it was the perfect place to store the beer to keep it cold. Unfortunately, it also kept the Wordsworth children cool, as their bedroom was directly above. Mary Wordsworth hatched a cunning plan to keep them warm. She covered the walls with newspaper, and her makeshift insulation is still in situ today. It reports the budget for 1800, with a total expenditure of £54,566,306.04. A little different from today. After a fascinating visit, Peter heads out onto the streets of Grasmere to offer his chocolate and orange shortbread to some unsuspecting visitors.
Have a try of the shortbreads. These are chocolate and orange sables. I made these this morning.
Well, I can certainly taste the orange in it. Can't
Yeah,
the orange
yeah.
really comes out in it.
Butter as well.
Wow.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Thank you.
After the break, I'm in the kitchen cooking wild boar burgers with a twist, plus a visit to Wordsworth's final resting place, and the story of a gingerbread that's been made to the same recipe since 1850. The Lake District has inspired countless authors and poets. In fact, it fueled the writings of one of England's most famous poets, William Wordsworth. And it fuels my culinary imagination. I'm Peter Sidwell. I'm in Grasmere, outside St Oswald's Church, final resting place of Wordsworth.
The church is dedicated to St Oswald of Northumbria, who was believed to have preached on the site before he died in battle in 642. It stands on the banks of the River Rothay and at the heart of the village, and was mentioned in the prelude. Wordsworth lies buried in the churchyard. His grave is surrounded by others of his family, including his wife, Mary, sister Dorothy, and his children, Dora, John and Thomas. They lie in the shade of a yew tree, one of 8 the great poet planted before his death. But that's not the only memorial here. The other is inside the church. The interior of the building has large, imposing roof timbers and still retained its earthen floor up until the 19th century. To the left of the altar, there's a marble memorial to Wordsworth. It's a profile relief of the great man himself, with a daffodil and bluebell on either side. Very apt. Wordsworth is not Grasmere's only claim to fame, and Peter Sidwell doesn't have to travel far to find the second. Tucked away in the corner of the churchyard is the Grasmere gingerbread shop. In 1850, if you'd been here, you would have seen Sarah Nelson, donned in her white apron and shawl, standing out in her cobbled yard, selling her wares of Helvellyn cakes, aerated water, and most importantly, her gingerbread. And over 160 years later, they're still making gingerbread to Sarah's secret recipe. It's baked fresh every day and is more of a cross between a biscuit and a cake, and very different from traditional cake-type gingerbreads, which are better known in the rest of the country.
Sarah's recipe might be a closely guarded secret, but mine isn't. If you fancy having a go at making some gingerbread for yourself, head to channel4.com/4food. So we're here. This is where all the action happens. This is where the gingerbread's baked. But through there, that's where all the secrets are. I've been trying to get in here for years and he won't let me. Not even his wife knows the secret to this recipe. Andrew prepares every batch of the mixture himself. It's then put into trays and ready to be baked. It only takes 5 minutes, so there's no time to hang around. Once cooked, it's removed and another takes its place in the oven. And then with this cutter here, it just puts on here. Can I have a go at this, Andrew?
Yeah, carry on.
Okay. So pop it onto here. Just press it down.
Yeah, firmly.
Firmly. Just press it all down. And that'll cut them all into individual portions. And then lift it up. Hopefully I'll get this bit right. Put that back on there. So just cut it through with a knife after it, just to make sure this thing's done the right job. They've added a twist to production nowadays. The gingerbread is also cut into various shapes for wedding favours. You only cut every other one, don't you? Because then when you get them, they come slightly joined together, don't they? Oh, the penny's dropped. So once they're all packed up, they go into the shop, they're wrapped up and sold to the customers, and then you just keep baking all day long, yeah? Right. They bake thousands of these biscuits every day to the same recipe that Sarah Nelson created in 1854. And as you can see, it's quite literally a cottage industry. So I got my gingerbread today from Grasmere, so I wanted to show you a quirky little recipe that I've been making for a while now. We need a decent sized grill pan. I'm going to put that on the heat so it gets really smoking hot. And then I've got some wild boar sausages that I've cut out the skins there, and I want to flavour those with some coriander seeds, a little bit of ginger, and then the gingerbread crumbs. So probably a good tablespoon of coriander seeds, because you get that really nice kind of crunch rather than just ground up spices. And then I want a little bit of ginger, just to give a little bit of kick of ginger, because with the gingerbread, that's sweet, and I want a little bit of bite in there as well. So I've got my gingerbread here, snap it in half, and the best way for me to get the crumbs off this is just put them together and kind of rub them, and I get all the crumbs off there. But if you're just using, you know, supermarket bought gingerbread, put them in a food processor and then blend them down to a really fine crumb. So we can get rid of those now for the time being. And then I want to add some fresh coriander. So I'm just going to nick a little bit from the back here, and I'm just going to cut it straight off. I've got the stalk here as well, and that's got a really kind of intense coriander flavour as well as the leaf. So if you buy it, make sure you chop it all up. So chop it really, really fine. That grill pan's getting nicely hot, so we'll be almost ready to start cooking these. So in with the coriander, and then I want to season these with a little bit of black pepper and a little bit of salt. And then basically just get your hands in and mix all the flavours around. Wash my hands. Okay, so I've just washed my hands, but you'll see I haven't dried them at all. And that's really important, because what we're going to do is we're going to shape them. And if you've got wet hands, it's much, much easier to handle the burgers. So you can see I'm not getting covered in sausage meat at all. So just shape them into little burger shapes and then straight into the pan. And that sizzle, that tells me the grill pan's ready. So in with a few more. These are really great. You can make these in advance as well and just pop them on a plate under some parchment paper and they'll just sit in the fridge, no problem, until you're ready to cook them. You don't need any oil because the wild boar meat's got some fat in it anyway, so there's no need to add any more at all. So there we go, I've got 4 in there, that should be enough. Just wash my hands. So while they're cooking, I'm just going to season them a little bit on each side. So this side, when I flip them over, the seasoning will go on the pan side down and I'll season that side as well. And while they're cooking, I'm just going to make the bread. So I've got a couple of nice big fresh ciabattas here. So I'm going to cut those down the middle. Open that up. And then I've been to the deli and I've bought some really nice locally made chili jam. And this is going to go really well with the sweetness of the burger. And then that little sort of chili tickle that you get from this stuff. So spread it onto the bread. Be as generous or as, you know, shy with this as you like. If you love a bit of chili, then put plenty on. And then I've got some rocket leaf. So just pop that on there as well. Now I reckon these burgers are probably ready to flip over. So just flip them over really quick. Look at those really nice scorch marks. They're going to be really good. And they're going to take about another 5 minutes, I'd say, on this grill. And then they'll be ready to serve. The best way to test if the burgers are ready, if they feel quite firm, that usually means they're cooked. So just transfer those onto the bread. And then give them a real good kiss of lime juice and really squeeze that lime juice. Get loads on there because you want to cut that richness of the boar. There we go. And then just put the breads on there. Just cut that in half. And there you have it, my boar burgers with gingerbread.
Full recipe details of this and all the other dishes featured in the series can be found at channel4.com/4food. It's easy to understand why Wordsworth was so inspired by this place. It has the same effect on millions of people who flock to the lakes every year, and me. I'll see you next time for another helping of the Lakes on a Plate.